So because recently we have a hot debate about AI and a lot of tools, artificial intelligence tools, which may affect our teaching as well as assessment. And Paula will talk about that in her presentation. And we are glad that we will learn something more and something new about the future educational activities we will conduct it. And as we all know that Paula is very, very famous in this field, and she has a lot of experience, and she has tried a lot of things, and she can tell us a lot of different types of attempt to deal with all these kind of problems. So without any further ado, let me give the mic to Paula. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim, for having me here. It's a great pleasure to see my former colleagues here and also people behind the screen. I think people who have been in my workshop in the past will know some of the story that I'm going to talk, because when I reflect what I have gone through in the past 20 years, there are so many changes across the time. Yeah. So today, Today, as we focus on blended learning, I want to see what sort of working environment that we have been through, and possibly I will talk a variety of possibilities, but at the same time, we know we are facing a lot more challenges nowadays. And hopefully by the end of this workshop, and that people have more ideas, can share your ideas together, because it's not about me talking about what I have walked through, but at the same time, sharing ideas among one another. So what happened when I was a teacher? Yeah, I used Moodle when I was working in Hong Kong U. So what I did, I put materials on, teaching in the class, get students doing activities in the class, ask them to write summaries to the forum after the class. And what's more, I asked them to do other things after the class. So am I doing blended learning? I asked them to do things in the class. I asked them to do things after the class. Well, to me, at that time, I'm talking about more than 10 years ago, I thought I have already done blended learning. But in fact, probably I was only doing e-learning. E-learning pretty much is the use of the tools, the platform, the learning management system that will allow me to put materials there and engage students in the class. That's what I did. In terms of the platform, I think you might have heard of WebCT, Blackboard, and Moodle. But then for that WebCT, I think some of you may not even have heard of, because it was then taken over by Blackboard. But those were the time that I have walked through. So to me, at that time, it's pretty much, okay, I make use of whatever technology that's available. And around that time, I even got a wiki site, the wiki site which allows me not just materials, but also allow my students doing their project work. I'm trying to make the use of technology, because I know unless I try it myself, I can't ask my student to try it. So I have all these of things when I was a teacher. So look at this. Can you recall it? Or does it reflect the time that you used your computer? It was taken in 2003. And of course, now when we look at the current practices, we know we have more gadgets around to help you as teacher to do your teaching. So I always like telling a little story. When I first started working, I work in a Poly U, and that I had an opportunity to teach a master degree program. So in that course, a website we call WebCity was set up, and also some forum activities were set up. What I did notice at that time is there was one very active students who kind of respond to each other before I start responding to the students. So I'm very curious. What's the students? I only got a name. I haven't got a face, because I haven't into teaching the class yet. So by the time when I was in the classroom, I watch and I check and I look. Guess what? The student was the one who sat at the last row, at the last table. And I thought the student should be sitting in the front. No, she's very active in the forum, but extremely quiet in the class. So at that time, that triggers my interest to do research in education. I don't know what your stories will be, but to me, students are so different. Some of them are shy in the classroom, but can be very active in the virtual world. And some are very active in the class, but might be very quiet in the forum. So we do have different characters of our students. Nevertheless, nowadays, when we look at our students' sort of livelihood, many of them were connected with social media. Not in my time, but now. Or if you ask your students, are they connected to any one of those social media sort of platform? Surely they do. But what does it mean as a teacher? Can we make use of some of these platforms to help us to connect with our students? In my days, I have thought of using Facebook, but I didn't. But I knew some teachers use Facebook to connect with the students. They found students respond more with Facebook than in Moodle. That's the reality because in the learning management system, students may not access it every day, but social media platform, they do. They access it every day. So back to our time now. We know before COVID, there is a variety of technologies available. We know some LMS is the learning management system, which has been around in colleges and universities for 20 years. But for smartboard, and some classes have smartboard, but some are still more traditional. Interactive classroom, which I will show a little bit later. And I know in some college, they do have some classes with interactive classrooms. And more we talk about, the more we look at what kind of technologies that students use. They might use smartphone, sure, but they might use iPad, they may use other things. So to us, we always say, bring your own device is the answer if you want to use technology in the classroom. And in some places, they might use AR, or augmented reality, and VR, the virtual reality, as a small portion of the teaching tools in the class. And in terms of the lecture recording system, um, in my experience when I was working in Chinese U, they do it in every single class. Well, you might ask, how many of the students do go back and watch those recorded videos? Well, I couldn't give you an exact sort of figure, if not percentage. Some students do, but majority of students do not go back to watch those videos, especially when they have attended the class. Okay, so turn it in. Yeah, of course, it's been around for over almost 2 decades. Okay, during COVID, the last few years, I think it we are so familiar with the video conferencing platform, Zoom or WebEx, which I don't need to explain more. Whereas the other things are pretty much more in aligned with, but for lecture recording is it's not just for some classes or some discipline. Almost all classes do recording so that students who cannot access live in the class can watch them afterwards. Particularly, we know that when some students, they don't have the enough Wi-Fi or good Wi-Fi access to attend classes. So it is very important to have lectures recorded. And and instead of having the examination, they all have to convert to quizzes, if not doing projects, as a replacement for regular examinations. And surely Turnitin is still in use. And one thing is, I don't know how many institutions use Proctor, that is having a system that is monitor what's in the screen, what's around in the environment to assure the students do the examination by himself or herself in maybe at her own place. So these are changing or happening in those few years. So what happened now? Well, Hong Kong has back to the norm, the normal, the normal. Yes, what's normal? New normal. Oh, new normal. That is because all teachers have been upskilled. That is, they can use Zoom as a tools to help them to conduct the lecture or the teaching class, the teachings. But at the same time, is they would like to see students coming in the classes. So I know in some college and some institution, they would have this running in classes. That is, some students are maybe back in their own country and then still connected at the same time in the class time. So this is the new normal. And lecture is back. Yeah, we can resume our time for lecturing. Yeah, that's a relief that we can have, the normal way of teaching. Look at this photo. I'm sure you know how excited the professor is, how excited in terms of you can sense the excitement in his face, in his body language. But if I invite you to look closer to the back. I'm sorry, it's deliberately out of focus. We're not trying to pinpoint individual students, but you might be able to sort of subtly sense some students have their head down or looking side, or some even have the head down like this in the back row. So what does it tell you? The lecturer or the professor are so excited about the teaching, and somehow students are not excited. I don't know. I hope that it doesn't often happen in your class. But when we look at lecture, normally we have like me, talk. And there is a study seeing how students' brainwave was kind of sort of activating across different activities. And that's taking a week's study and look at the brain activities for students. This is, yeah, class time. This is sleeping time and class time. Can you see some similarities in those patterns? I just don't know my students whether they have the same experience. But in fact, it's not just what they are attending or not. Some students just don't bother to come to the class. I'm sure some teachers might have the experience that, oh, especially towards the end of the academic year, might be week 12 with 13, students are so busy doing project works, they don't even attend my classes. I heard about this many, many times. Often students have other agenda. They may be they might have part-time work. They might sleep very late. They were short of sleep. A number of these reasons are the reason why they can't or why they choose not to come. But this study was done in 2006. 2006, yeah. They even talk about whether there are printed materials available. Oh, yeah, this is a very old study, dated. It's nothing happened now. No, it still happen a lot nowadays, especially after COVID. When I read other literature, they talk about students are used to online. That is, they are used to sitting at home, watching the screen, and take the lesson. Some students find it is okay. That's how they can take the classes. That's how they get the score. That's how they get through the exam. No problem. But as an educator, you always ask, is that the way how we want our students to graduate? Just what's in their head? And in fact, it also reflects on how we operate or how we run our lectures or our teaching. We know how students learn. This is a theory is if students do tasks, they learn more. When I said learn, it doesn't mean they remember more. It means they will have more sort of capability to do analysis and then do sort of the procedural skills. But how much do we do in the lecture? Yeah, because we talk all the time. Okay, like me, like now, I'm asking you to listen and listen for minutes and minutes. So the attendance or the attention is dropped over time. But if in between they were asked to do task, if not, they have to do some hands-on work, then they learn deeper and better. And still, we have to be remember as a students when they come to your class, it's not just the physical presence, it's what they see, what they hear, what they are going through in the head, things that they have to be taking concern about as they come to your class. So it's a combination of what they can get in your class at the same time, whether they are ready to learn in the class. For flipped classroom, this term has been around more than 10 years. And I know some teachers like the idea and some teachers try the practice. That is, having this one-way lecturing mode recorded so that students can watch at their own time. And when they come to the class time, they are not just repeating the lecture. Instead, there are quite a number of varieties of activities that they have to do in the class to solve problem, to do case analysis, to do activities in the class. So I don't know whether you have think about it or whether to make an attempt to do something about it. The one thing two words I would want to draw attention about interactive and multi-directional, particularly multi-directional, which I would focus a bit more as we're talking about the learning context. So now I'm moving on what we meant by flipped classroom or blended learning. That is what they do outside the class time. Sometimes we just say asynchronous. That is not that they do it at their own time, own space. I'll talk a little bit about pre-class activity and then in-class activity and then post-class activities. So for the pre-class activities, as I said, some teachers will prepare maybe some teaching videos, hopefully within 20 minutes, not an hour, if not 2 hours of lecture. Because particularly during the COVID time, we did have more research on the not just the quality of the video, but also the length of the video. And we know how much attention students can have when they watch a video. So we'll call some optimum length is around 20 minutes for the video. And then if you have, I got so much to cover, I can cover it within 20 minutes, you better chunk it into shorter videos so the student can take a little bit at a time. And then the other one is not just watching lectures. You can ask them to do some exploration. Now I'm going to show a very short video. That is, this is the students doing some investigation, not investment. And that, I hope that it won't scare you off. If you find it's a bit too scary, you just close your eyes, please. Well, because what he is doing is an investigation of crime scene. Now, this is a 360 video. Let me put it a bit bigger. It's coming to the crime site. This is the students doing exploring. Now, I'm not so sure if what he's seeing. Let me turn around. Turn around. Okay, I'll stop here. I'm not showing more. Oh yeah. Okay, if you're so scared, don't be. Now, even as short as such a video, I don't know how it might trigger if it were your students. Sometimes we present a lot of information, a lot of theories, but we haven't really triggered a sense of curiosity. the sense of interest. Whether you might say, well, I'm not teaching a crime investigation, I'm not teaching blah, 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 blah. But I want you to take the thought. The idea is, what did we do to trigger students' curiosity? You might think, well, it's not related to my discipline. Think about it again. Anything that triggers students' curiosity, they will suck in. Okay. And later on, when I show more what teachers kind of design the work or exercise for the students, you know why triggering curiosity is the key to get them to be excited about your course. And other than using some triggering sort of video to entice them to think what they need to look for certain sort of topic. And the other thing, which I know a number of teachers start working on, is building up some quizzes in the video. So as they teach, as they recorded 20, 30 minutes, they will stop in some moment and add in some question to ask the student an answer or ask the student a thoughts. So instead of watching movies, no, you want their brain to be active, to think about what if and why and how as they watch the video. And these examples I show you now for the next few ones are done in the PolyU by some staff in PolyU. In those days, we got a team of technical staff to help the production of some sort of exercise. This kind of exercise is pretty much like, okay, I want you to do some lab work. Instead of coming to the lab right away, you do it online first. Do the e-lab, that is doing a virtual experiment, test your knowledge on a safe environment before you try it out in the lab. So we did it with a team of people doing the production. The teacher do not have to produce it. The teachers just give us information, what they want the students to try out. And other than all this variety of things that you can get your students to do, one tools that I have been trying to encourage teachers to try. And last year, I really got teachers to try out. This is the site called tools called Peruso. Peruso now has become in the University of Wollongong College, Hong Kong. They were inside the Moodle as one of the learning tools. Why I want to introduce it to you who are from other institutions is that this platform is encouraging students to do reading. Reading? Yeah, that's the big challenge for our students. They don't read. I hope that it's not your students, but we know a lot of students have difficulties to read, especially those journal articles. When you ask them to read, they didn't really read. They just come in empty-headed. So what do we do? Well, let me introduce you our staff, GDQ, who have tried in the college and set up the system and get the student to try to do reading, not just reading. The students have to do highlight annotations or even put questions in. What does it mean? I couldn't understand certain line. So what it ends up when students use the system, we can see a list of annotation that can be an explanation done by the students or questions raised by the students, and then question that's responded or addressed by other students. Do you think this works? I tell you, it works. It's not just happen overseas, somewhere in the US. No, it can happen in our class, in students or for students in Hong Kong. So one good thing is, if there are so many contributions by the students, will it take a lot of time for the teachers to mark through or look through or read through everything? Well, the teachers can if you have time. But what's the point of having it? Because the system itself would allow an automated mark for the students. Wow, does it really? Yes, we try it and we can see the system will have some automated sort of grading corresponding to the students' contribution to the reading. If you have any questions, I will invite you to contact Judy Q from the college. She will show you great examples. And so this is something that we have never tried. I know a lot of teachers in Hong Kong have never tried, but I would strongly recommend it to you, especially if you want our students to do reading, not just reading, but raise questions that they are not sure, that they have doubts, and then also have students responding to each other's question. I hope it works out for you. So this is sometimes we call so learning. We think learning is really pretty much individual. No, it can be a collaborative learning through just using the platform, the tool. Another example is, I'm watching the time a little bit, is helping students to extend their scope of learning by inviting your students to join or even just one course we call the MOOC, Massive Open Online Course. This has started in 2012, over 10 years now. You can see the trends, that is how much sort of growth in terms of the MOOC courses available. So why it keeps going up? Because there are demands. And why do we need our students to join? I'm teaching them. I know the subject well. Why I still want them to join other courses in parallel? Those can be short courses like 4 to 6 week type of thing. Why? Because one thing I personally experience is if you join a course, you can have a lot more students joining you together to walk through the course. What's the benefit? Well, if there is any question, when I put it in the forum in the MOOC, I almost spontaneously got a response from students from one of the countries. I don't have to wait for hours and hours and wait for the reply from the tutor. It happened. Okay. So to me, that's more spontaneous communication and responses from the peer in the world. I don't know, because they are so active, because we are living in different time zones. There are people responding to it. So this is the benefit of having our students to join a global learner group. And the benefit, not just about feeling satisfied, but we are open our students' eyes to all kinds of culture and also extend our horizon of ways of learning, and which is crucial if they are going through a lifelong learning mode. So I come quite a bit about the pre-class. I still got a lot to walk through about in-class and post-class. But think, even before they come to your class, there's a variety of things you can invite your students to do or to try. When they come to your class, I know all of you are familiar the mode, the setting, what it's like. Which is the way that you have your students? Is it like a lecture mode, or more like a seminar group, or more like smaller group, but the setting is more not like in lecture hall? Which is your mode or the teaching environment? Well, I know it's not your choice. You were given courses to teach. You were given the setting. It's not your choice. But with different teaching environment, it might have different types of engagement, right? Even when I said teaching, we tend to have teachers in the front and then a lot of people sitting right in front of you. And you start your lecture like me now, going through slides after slides. I didn't give you anything to do. You just keep listening. But this professor, he's from MIT. He's teaching psychology. As I even watch his course, It's 50 minutes long. But when I sense when to attending his course, literally every
Following content is provided under a Creative Commons license. Your support will help MIT open courseware. So, you might have the stats.
so he's do some teaching, and then afterwards he will show graphics, and then he will show. See if you can see it now. Um, when the lecturer teach, he walks through quite a number of things, and I'm not going through with you with all the details. But even when he give visual sort of sorry, let me move the bar a little bit. He asks students to respond to the screen. He asks students different responses from time to time. But then here, let me just kind of escape the video. You will have time to watch it at your own time. But even as one exercise, the fun thing is you can see the word list here. If you read it loud to your head, what can you see? You can see the word. Okay. If I were you, I'd say, okay, red, green, blue, yellow, pink, orange, blue, so on and so forth. You can easily read it, right? And then the next exercise he will ask you to do. Okay, now it's not reading a word, but read out the color that you see in the words. And then you say, okay, green, yellow, white, pink, orange. You start seeing me struggling reading the words because my mind have to shift to see the color rather than the font, the words in front of you. So those are little sort of exercise from time to time in that 15 minutes of lecture has to walk through. This is just one example the teachers get the students to do exercise in a lecture time. So what I'm saying is, if this is an interactive lecture, you will still catch the students' attention because they are not passively taking in ideas. From time to time, they stop, say, okay, I want you to do a task. And then the students have to respond to the task. So the question is, if we run our lecture, we give student time to think, students respond to us. And in the old days, when I didn't use too much of technology, that professor didn't use any technology. They just asked the student to shout, what did you see? What did you say? So the student just kind of call back the answer. So for me, I felt like, well, if I have to ask them to call back, there's so many noise, I use paper. I use color paper to ask them to show me what's your choice, what's your preference. So that's I call low tech student teacher interaction, because not all teachers like using technology. But I also try technology. In one incident or some incidents, I use Padlet, Padlet, which is another platform to allow students to post up their thoughts individually. And what it meant is students are still giving me thought and ideas about their thinking. And I also try Mentimeter. It's also like a quiz, multiple choice to show their preference. So I can get spontaneously sense the students' thought and responses to my question. So I leave it to you whether you want to use low tech or some kind of technologies in the class. But at the same time is I use, you can see the earlier few examples is pretty much students respond to my question. I'm seeing individual responses. But today, I want you to think more, do more. It's about student-student interaction. That is multi-directional. This is a classical lecture hall. I got students to talk to the neighbors in pairs, in threes. So when I said I asked them to talk, not just about anything, I will give them tasks to do, search for certain thing, and then share among with one another. And even in another lecture environment, still like a bench like, I got students first to respond to me in front of the the screen, showing their choices. And then I took it a pause, few minutes, talk to your peers among one another. Why you choose A? Why not C? Oh no, I choose C because blah blah blah. You know, they can start talking out loud about their thought, about their rationale, about why they make a choice of so and so forth. By talking out, and then I ask them, okay, vote again, second time, and see if there are changes of thought, if not idea. That will help the students to clarify their conception, help them to think aloud. Whatever is in their head, they have to explain to each other the rationale. So this is a very powerful way of engaging students to clarify their thoughts. Another possibility, still in lecture hall, in benches, instead of talking to me, they were assigned to certain sort of game tasks in their notebook. They have installed it. And then people work in small groups. It can be in trios or they have to tackle certain scenarios among themselves. So what I just illustrate is, can we make our students interact with one another in our teaching time? Okay, that's the lecture time. What about in tutorial, in a smaller group, in a classroom, not in the benches? Similarly, you can still think about what sort of environment that you have in. And some classroom, you might have the luxury to have the seats move around. And then you can ask them, okay, form their own group so they can be more sort of closer together and more flexible to talk to one another. And sometimes depends on the teaching environment. And because I have been to a different environment, and then sometimes they were in benches, the chairs like the regular stool, they cannot just move around, but they were sit in groups already. So they know that you have to think about some kind of group task in the class time. And in another occasion is I got another sort of possibility to have a bigger space, and that's there are space in the middle. So I call them, okay, use your notebook, your phone, anything, search for certain thing, and I ask them, come out, share what you have found. One thing is, I don't know whether you really like the ideas, and that is to have students share what they have found. In the past, we rarely ask students to talk among each other or ask them to share, this is what I got. But this is a very simple, powerful experience. Guess what? Whatever one student finds, it's often different answers. It's not just showing, hey, this is what I got. It's they have to talk, hey, this is something that I have found and I searched and I found this is, they have to explain to each other their answer. This is a very powerful learning moment. I can sense that the time they start, the noise is going up and up and up. And when I mentioned about some places with interactive classroom, that is, other than students sit in groups, in each group, they might have their own screen. With that, it will allow students working in group and project their work to the screen. So what it can do is, it doesn't matter what answer they have found, but they can share within their own group and project to their own screen and talk about what they have found within their own group. So you can imagine, use your imagination. There are 5 or 6 screens around. So you got 5, 6 screens talking about different things. And they are learning within their own groups about the findings. Sometimes the environment has changed a bit. For this location, they don't have the 6 screen in front. they only have one screen in the front, a large screen. But you can see students are still sitting in groups, but the idea is each group can project independently to the front screen to show their work. So it very depends on the environment. And I know some of you might have different teaching environments, but think about how you can maximize the facilities for you to get students to work in groups. Or you say, hey, I got a very classical classroom, no fancy interactive classroom, no big screen, no blah, blah, blah. But it's quite all right. We can still get our students to work. And this time, it's a typical classroom. There's just a little space in the front. And I got the students, it's a smaller group, right? And I get them to work, I'll call Socratic seminar. Socratic seminar, what's that? Oh, people actually, you can see, actually, not too clearly, they are sitting in two circles, one inner circle and one outer circle. At the moment, it's just a break in between the inner circle people consulting with the people from the outer circle. So the fun thing is the inner circle is the only person who can speak. The people from the outside cannot speak. The only time they can speak with each other is when I give them time to talk to each other. So when they were debating, talking about the findings with the inner circles, I'll give them time to break, talk to the students from the outer circle, get more ideas, and then coming back to the inner circle to continue the debate or discussion. So all this little thing, you might say, wow, does it work for my class? I tried, and it works. And students always find it exciting to try different format. If you only use one way, one format, they will get bored very quickly, very easily. But if you just change slightly, turn the setting, the arrangement, you will have a different response or results. And another examples I showed is use, I taught these classes on problem-based learning. So I really give them some kind of problems, and then they have to do team competitions. And for this, they love it. Whether it's adults, whether it's students, I try it. They just like trying to solve and try to create things in order to compete with the other teams. And I know for this project, the QESS talk about team game-based education. Sometimes we add in some elements of competition or game, like whether it's digital or physical, students love it. Now, we talk so much about in the class. And in fact, some teachers do take students out. And this is a teacher who, Susanna Chu, used to work in BSU. And she arranged the students to go to the Line Rocks in groups as they are learning how to go through the leadership. So they were given some parameters, settings, and then they have to do outdoor activities in order to learn the experience, learn through the experience. This is not just getting a bonus, a mark, but it's a time they have to work as a team together to practice the communication skills and to think about how to, based on limited resources and time, to tackle the challenge. So this is an experiential learning. And to them, this is fun day, but at the same time, it's tough and hard. So we talk about before class. We talk about what we can do in the class or outside of the classroom. What about after class? After class, yeah. Typically, I think you might have some students staying behind and ask you questions, right? I'm sure a lot of teachers would tell you the same story. Oh, students stay behind and then ask questions. They may not ask you questions in the class, but they stay after the class and ask you questions. That's a very good sign. But in fact, we can also arrange a variety of tasks that we can have them to do after the class. And very often, This is an example by Dr. Mosquito Leung from the UOWHCK, and that she set up forum activities. Forum is a very useful tools, I use the word tools, to engage our students at their own time. You can set up case, you can set up video, you can set up anything for them to respond to after the class. And the other things that we can do, remember, if you have invite them to do some MOOC course, even in each MOOC course, they bound to have some kind of exercise to help them to test their understanding. So other than the quiz questions set by the teacher, the MOOC course itself have some quiz questions that the students can try. And this one is a more sophisticated scenario based of questions that the students try it out in the MOOC course. And for some teachers who are teaching in a laboratory, they might, talk about what they have to do in the lab, and then somehow afterwards they forgot. So what the teachers did with this is you can see some hot spots there, and teachers put some video and some quizzes at different points so that the students can revisit and view the steps, particularly the procedural steps, what to do with the machine. And this is in the nursing sort of clinic setting. And again, students were set up to find where things are being located. So all these are after class, after the class time, they have to revisit and review what they need to know in the workplace. And this is a more fancy game-based type of situation. This is like a board game. When this is designed, it's also for nursing exercise. But then it's a board game. The students can do it with the competitions of a robotic sort of competitors with the game. And this is another problem-based solving games that students can try out. This is an OT, occupational therapy, where students have to do some treatment plan with different settings. And so these are given the patient with different disability, living in a different environment, working in different occupations. So with different combination, they have to plan treatment plan afterwards. And this is a blog site. A blog site, this is not an individual blog, it's a group blog, and that students in groups have to produce blog. Oh, it's a bit dated, isn't it? At that time, the students were learning how to be a journalist, a digital journalist. So the teacher designed this sort of platform to allow students to practice how to write like a journalist. So these are the technology, the platform that will allow students to practice. And some teachers will say, oh, I got not much time to do all these fancy sort of gadgets and games and so on and so forth. You got what and actually just get students to do a 3 minutes video of a certain topic. Okay. Students have to create the video, and what they have to do is the peers have to do review of the 3 minutes video. So teachers pretty much is giving instruction, expectation, assessment criteria, and students have to produce the video. And to engage the students is to allow them to, based on certain criteria, to do peer review. This is an online game. Remember that there were outdoor activities that I mentioned earlier. And for that, it's a physical challenge. And this as an online challenge. It's actually by the same class of students. They have tried it out virtually, not going up to the Lion Rock, this time to Mount Everest. But with the digital game, they were asked to work as a team together. They were given some time limits, and different checkpoint with different resources to tackle. So students have the real site experience, but also have the online virtual game-based experience. What's the advantage? Well, they can make mistakes here, but they can't do it in a real, actual physical challenge. Here, they can try and retry and reset the setting so that they can redo and practice again. So that's why, if you have budget in mind, sometimes we might buy some shelf products. This is not produced or created by the staff. They just buy the product and get the students to work on this digital game. And all this are helping students to build up their skills, like to be leaders, how to have communication skills, how to solve the problem that they have. So, other than that, what else? We still got a few more to go. This is a patient, a simulated patients. And students gone through the in-class sort of lectures and to practice. Now they have to form in groups and work in a simulated patients with a site where similar to a hospital or clinic. And they have to work in a group to tackle this patient whose physical condition suddenly changed. So all these are simulating the work environment to build up the proficiency, the skills by the nursing students. And maybe other than the actual practices, some some classes were asked to write reflection. Reflections often comes may not be your priority, but for some discipline, reflection is one of the useful way to engage students to reflect on not just what I have done, but what works and what doesn't work, and why, and how they can improve it. So all these are ways to engage our students on the learning. Now I'm talk a little bit about the virtual, the more high-tech sort of setting, which allows students to have an immersions into the environment. And this is a virtual trip. This is not nothing to do with COVID. It's before COVID. This virtual trip was website or site was created to allow students really not physically, virtually, into different locations. And then by going into seeing through an immersive environment, they can go through as if they are visiting the museum, the temple, and the streets in the area. You might ask, well, does it work? I tell you what, some students, we always ask students how they feel. So, it's good. I prefer the virtual field trip. Why? Um, sometimes it's quite time consuming to go to the site, and then it's crowded, or sometimes it's wet. They have many reasons. They say, oh, I like doing virtual trip. But if you were teachers, this is not a replacement. It is just a mental virtual visit so that by the time when they go to the actual field trip, they can ask more questions. They can look things more closely. This is just getting them some mental rehearsal, mental sort of images on what they might anticipate. And in fact, in the medical field, there are growing interests to use the virtual reality. Um, that's a project I've done with in the Chinese year. But when I read about in the UK, they even say that given they do try it out with the online, the virtual immersive experience to the regular classroom learning experience, they are getting more impressive of what they can do in this sort of setting, even in a clinical and for a clinical environment. So if people are interested in this field, certainly there is a growing interest in making it more possible and practical to allow students to have that personal experience other than the actual clinical place. We set quite a number of activities, right? But I still have to blow your mind. These are the images taken by students because they need to illustrate their knowledge, their understanding taught by the teacher. This is from Professor Lillian Bibles' class. Well, don't forget, our students have cameras. They love using their cameras to extract things that they have seen. They like it, they love it, because the more they discover, the more excited they are. And another example discovery by the students is about the infected trees. For people who might want to talk to Lillian, you can still remember those experiences. Students are forming groups, different location, geographic local location to different in the new territory, and they have to inspect, to look around where the infected trees are. Where are they? And they have to take photos and then write descriptions. And together they form a very good sort of collections of the infected trees in this area, in the new territory. All this become a way of learning. The students, whenever they go to the countryside or whether they see trees around, they just look, where are the fungus? Yeah, is it an infected tree? Is it going to fall? Okay. So that's the impact on students after they've done the project. Then you ask yourself, can I get my student to collect some field data? Can I ask them to do some exploration? Can I ask them to capture examples to demonstrate what they've learned? They love it. They love discovery. One more example is by Judy Gill. She get her students, go to Lantau Island, another outdoor activities. And this time, again, she got students in groups taking photos of species that they have seen. And you know, in the countryside, Judy's can only be in one place, but there are students groups in different places. So what happened is the students use an app called iNaturalist. And their phone were connected with the apps. And so after they take the photos, they can get some advice on the type of species that they have seen locally. I don't know whether you have tried it with your students. This idea is so good in a sense. Sometimes students see just trees, branches, and leaves, and so on and so forth. They don't know the name. Same as me when I go out in the countryside. Oh, I see. Oh, that's a red flower. Oh, that's yellow trees or whatever, or yellow flowers. But I can't give the name. But now with the apps, just take photos. You will get a suggested species name. That kind of spontaneous sort of learning process helps students to have a vivid memory on what they have done on the site. So we've gone through so many examples. The whole idea is now, as teachers, I know you got chapters, syllabus you have to walk through. But what happened is, have you rethink what they can do outside the class time? Can they do some independent studies? Can they do some collaboration like the perusal, reading and sharing questions and answers together? And then by the time they come to your class, what kind of tasks you can get them excited, get them work together, get them to crack and solve the problems together. If you want them to know the basic concept, the theories, into videos, let them explore at their own time. So I want you to rethink how we can get your students working in groups. We talk about blended learning. Mostly, we just think about face-to-face. As I said, it can be active for some students, but it can also be passive for some. And for the digital era, they can have the devices that they can do at their own time. Some of them can be active. Well, some might still be passive. Don't get me wrong, okay? But if you have both, both possibility to engage the mind, we can surely see that we get more students being active and fewer students become passive. And the ultimate goal is we talk so much about in multi-directional sort of learning among one another is can we think about how we can shift our duties, our responsibility to the students? We teach, yeah, we ask them to remember, to recall, but until they start doing it, learning from one another, then they can really master their own learning. One thing we talk so much about asynchronous, that is doing it at their own pace, at their own time. Well, I don't know how many students are so motivated, so excited, they will do everything. And in fact, we can't check them. Oh, no. Yes, you can a little bit. So what do you mean? If we use LMS, the learning management system, nowadays, they do have some kind of interface to allow students to see their own progress. I know in the college here, there is an interface to allow students to see if you have set this sort of progress bar, students can, and both teachers and student can, if they have done and checked, if they have gone beyond the deadline that goes in red. So all this become like a sort of reminder to students. Have they done it? Have they completed on time? And there are some other interface. If other colleges or university are using it, other platform, there are other interface to show to the teachers about the students' commitment to those asynchronous tasks. So early on, I talk about I did e-learning. But now we are talking about blended learning. That is engaging students doing things within and after class and before class time. So can we get our students to do it, or can we create that kind of environment to get our students to do it? What is our role? Okay. We might create interesting video. We can set some checkpoint for them to respond. We can set up perusal. It's not too difficult. If you have questions, probably you can contact Judy how to set up, but it's there. Can we set up environment that allows students to debate among one another, talk to each other, work together, competing with one another in games, and ask them or allow them to ask questions, or invite them to ask questions among one another. One thing is, we know AI is around. AI is not coming. AI is around us. For teacher, I would say this is one example. Early on when we said perusal, this is also AI mediated, particularly when we talk about the grades, the contribution of grades for students. They have research on and then make comparison between the tutor's grade and the system generated, the grades generated from the system is more reliable, consistent through the system. So we know AI is here with us. It's up to us, teacher, to identify the apps or the tools that may help students and to engage students on their learning. One thing we can also do, other than looking for technology, we can still do some basic thing which get students learn from one another, other than in the class time, they talk. You can even extract some good exemplars from the students' work, and then put them as a way to share among each other. You might think, well, what's the point of using my time? They finish their work. They finish their assignment. They are just waiting for the grades, right? Students are curious. Don't get me wrong. They like to see what the other groups are doing. Especially, this is handpicked by the teachers. Hey, look at this. These are very good examples. They like to look at exemplars because sometimes if they are not as creative or imaginative to find answers, they can learn by watching each other's work. They like doing this. And so we said it's important to engage our students, get them to reflect on how they're doing with their own work, but teacher has to set it up. This is the progress bar has been around more than a year now. I'm not so sure how many teachers have set it up in their course, because you have to spend a little bit of time to set it up. But once you have set it up, you got reports on student performance. You got reports on students who have completed, if not completed. So you can easily monitor whether there are some students who are at risk. That is, they don't do it on time. And one thing is, if you spot students have problem and troubles, the system will allow you to give feedback, personal feedback to the students. And this is also important to engage our students. Going to the very last few slides about what we can do with the system. I feel like I have to emphasize again whether we would like our students to get into one of the MOOC course. This is also a feedback from the students. The students who walk through, try out some of those MOOC courses, they said, well, next time, if I want to find out something, the student himself can go and look for his own MOOC course. Why they need to do it? Because, we never know how many times they have to change their career. They know things keep changing. They know they have to keep learning. Through you introducing the MOOC, they know where to look for the next MOOC for themselves. So if you haven't tried, I encourage you to think about it. Some of the MOOC courses might cost will charge with a certificate, and some are still free. So you can just look for some free courses for students if you want to, and see if there are fundings, if it requires some course for the certification. The other things about the technology one, this example is pretty much about using of VR. VR, I wouldn't say is everybody's cups of tea, because there is a lot of time investment to produce a good VR exercise. But I still like to show you an example, because I personally, if I were the students, I would find it fun. This is for social work. So I'm not playing with it. It's actually captured by the students who try this VR apps. So as in a social work context, students go visiting the place, observe the environment of the people who the person need to be helped. So it's kind of allowing students to do some exploration and also think about what need to be attended to if they go visiting. So they have to make some choices, and before they try to make an attempt and talk to a client. So you might think, what's the value of doing these practices? All these game-based, virtual-based, they are giving them situation that they have to anticipate. How should they respond to when they approach to a client's place? What should they say? What's in their mind when they approach a client? So they have to practice it and try it out through the VR. And the VR allowed them to kind of immerse themselves into a situation, but at the same time, practicing some kind of observation skills. All these are part of the skills for the students if they become a social worker, what they need to attend to, what sort of signs and things that they have to, so on and so forth. So, okay, I think I stop here. VR is powerful when you really get the person into the environment. When I tried this with the pharmacist students, they would say, do I have to do VR? You feel like, oh, don't you like it? Sometimes it's not so straightforward for them, or if they have to do something behind the screen, they might not be comfortable. But it takes some time for them to get used to. And sometimes it's that they really shut off from the actual situation. They will feel a bit sort of different, when you put them away from the real world. So when you try out with VR, you may not always get 100%. Oh, yes, this is a good experience. But you have to test it out and try it out. Some students like it and some don't. Particularly when we tried this experiment a few years ago, I'm talking about almost 3 years ago. That time students would say, oh, I find a bit dizzy after I put it on for 10 seconds. So, I mean, at that time, we're still kind of resolving the physical, technical sort of uh, um, limits in terms of the equipment, how well it can cope with the setting. But nowadays, I think the software is a lot more powerful, more sort of stream. So that kind of dizziness, ill sickness will be a lot less. But if you have an attempt to think along that, you have to think very closely how you plan for the setting, what kind of skills you want your students to acquire through the experience. This is another type of experience, but it's more on a virtual type, which allows students to take risk, if not error and mistake. So that by the time when they come to the real patients, real client, real setting, they are more confident. This is another fun toy. Not in our college, not in the college, but back in the Chinese U, they did also train up robots to be a TA to work with some students setting. But for for the US, what they do is they do have some kind of challenge to have students to design some sort of games to allow this kind of robot to do some tasks. It's a challenge. So the robot can be, well, what I can see in examples in Hong Kong. Have you been to Café Carol? Have you been to Café Carol? There are robots in Café Carol. Have you been to the OT, the physiotherapy? I went to in the Prince of Wales. They have a robot to help the physio. So in hospitals now in Hong Kong, in some, I wouldn't say all, they use robot to help. Think about your students. They can design something to program and see what this type of robot can help to streamline the work process if you are teaching engineering, okay, or computers. So we talk a lot about teachers. So what about students? Do they have to do something? Yeah, well, they have to attend classes, they have to take exams, or all this requirement because this is part of the accreditation requirement. And the more we get our students to use the phone as the learning tools, they need to be more critical in terms of what they can get, what sort of information they read. And then what they have to do is also to not just to do with the tools, is to reflect, like us teachers, to reflect whether the tools help, whether the tools work for them. Because sometimes we Some teachers spend so much energy and time to create some VR, some games. They think students will get excited, but some do, but some may not. So we all have to do reflection on what we have tried and get the students to reflect on what works for them. And then when students have some sort of question and challenge, you provide them some personalized feedback, which is very, very important. We talked a little bit slightly about the authentic experience, which to me, every subject teacher might touch on certain part of their curriculum. Personal learning experience, particularly if they have to go to the field work, into the community to have interactions with people, they learn a lot more. They have more personal sort of excitement when they go through. Even though some students might be a bit reserved, but as they walk through that kind of experience, they know what they would do well in the future. And what we don't often do is expect our students to reflect not just the experience, is what works well and how they can learn better and work better with peers. So there are things that we expect or hopefully our students can do. We know students have different learning styles, different ways, different pace of learning. And for us teachers, if we say, any questions? No questions. They got it. No, we are wrong. Even though students may not ask or raise hands in the class, it doesn't mean they don't have questions, or it doesn't mean they know everything what you just walked through. Like now, I walk through just kind of give you different examples, different variety examples what you can do. But until you try it out, then you know what works for you, especially for your students. One thing is we want our students to have the capability to learn, especially the world is changing fast. No, it's much, much, much faster than when we were students. So we hope that they got the skills how to learn. At this time, before I get into the emerging sort of technology, I feel like you might have some question. Is there any question that we talked about the pre-class, the in-class, the post-class, all kinds of things that we can have our students to try and do? Do you have any sort of, well, hang on. I got a question. Any questions? Is there any questions in the site? Yes?
Appropriate question. This is Helene here. Those of you who are in UOW College Hong Kong will know me. Now, Paula, you taught us about synchronous learning, asynchronous learning, and to put it very simply, all we want to do is enhance engagement of students in their learning, right? This is very simple. But do the students realize what we are doing and how can they assess themselves, assess whether they themselves have added value to the learning? Can you get what I'm saying? That the Moodle, that sort of tool in Moodle, only helps students see how much they have completed the learning task in some ways. But I am wondering whether students realize that they have achieved the learning outcomes, which we always talk about. I mean, when VQ comes, they will ask us, do you think the students have achieved the learning outcomes? And we produce all this data, our pilot assessment project, etc. But are those data genuine by looking at their marks? At least in our college, this is the way we assess our pilot assessment project. So I'm just thinking, if teachers try to assess the students, can we turn it a little bit that get the students to assess their own learning? Wouldn't it be more fruitful? Because even if the students have achieved high marks, do they really know that they have achieved the learning outcome? Sorry, I mean, it's a very complicated question.
When we talk the word metacognition, that is helping students to reflect on what they're doing and what works and what doesn't work. The system that I showed early on say, oh, they have done something, whether they have checked or done something. That's one type of data, kind of getting students to have sense of whether they have done certain things. But whether they are doing it well, or whether this is enough for them, or whether they feel like, well, I got more than that. We can only capture some part of data with the LMS, Learning Management System, because the LMS doesn't cover everything. When you think about learning itself, there are so many things that we are not working through the LMS, included like perusal. Perusal is another sort of separate system which work around the student access or how they work in those question things. In theory, when I said theory, it was back a few years ago when I was in a conference, talk about learning analytics. You're talking about a system and the whole university, college, institution. Things are integrated. What do you mean? Not just LMS. It could include library data. What it meant. Oh, how many books they borrowed? If not, how things that whether they stayed inside the library, whatever. There are so many, or whether they went to make a booking in rooms, maybe they're doing for the tutorial, so on and so forth. So there are a variety of data around the whole institution. We only capture some of this. LMS is only one part of the data set. So back to the system have its own limitation. It doesn't reflect the whole outcome. When you said, well, whether we should ask students to do their self-rating, self-assessment, we say self-assessment, how they felt or how they think they have achieved certain outcomes. I would say yes and no. From the research we have done in education, we often did peer review or peer assessment, self-assessment, teachers assessment, all these sort of different assessment to see whether students really grappled and get the learning outcome. We can see that there is some sort of alignment between teachers' evaluation, teachers' assessment, and peers' assessment. I haven't read much about how self-assessment are kind of aligned with the outcomes of the peer and teachers' assessment. Because self-assessment is a very subjective way to do it. I'm not saying we don't trust students. Students, we often ask them, okay, by the end of the course, let's do a survey on teachers' evaluation, okay? They do it all the time. Now you ask them, okay, do it yourself. They can still do it. But how vigorous, how honest, if not how deep, thorough sort of reflection on themselves, it's so hard for us to say, yeah, students can do it. Or, yes, we got evidence that the research said, blah, blah, blah. Up to now, I rarely seen that kind of self-assessment being validated in that regard. But if you ask, when you do have time, towards the end of every course, we often ask students to do teachers' evaluation, right? It's very much about the course, how they feel the teacher, how they feel about the course. But we don't often rarely ask how they feel about themselves on each course. I don't see much on that. It's pretty much how they judge the course, the program, so on and so forth. If you do it on every single course, same students will do it 10 seconds, done. They will think this is things that have to do, done, out of the list. But if you really have time to talk to them in person, I think you need time to have that kind of trusting relationship and talk about what helped them to learn. And often students, we know over the years, students focus on the grades. The grades. What it meant is they often come, why can't I get a better grades? That's their concern. And when you talk to graduates, when they graduate, they will know that actually some teachers are very demanding. Those teachers help them in their work. But that comes 2 years after the graduation. I heard about that sort of story. So often when teachers make demands on expectations on students, students may not appreciate on the time when they are going through the course. But until they are really testing out in the workplace, they have to use different skills to do in the work. Then they know those tasks designed by the teachers help them to do the job. But it doesn't come straight away. So even though you would like to see whether it works or not, or help them to achieve the intended learning outcome, very often it's a very gray area. It is hard to say, hey, they really achieve, other than the coverage. And I know in another university, they use another sort of LMS. And even with each LMS have the course level intended learning outcome. And they even link to certain assignment with certain course level of intended learning outcome. So they just use the coursework, whatever coursework they did, and then put portions into the course level intended learning outcome. There are some institutions doing that, not in Hong Kong. If I remember, that's probably in Malaysia, if not Indonesia. There are some universities did that with the system. But then you have to be absolutely kind of clear, certain assignment align correctly with those intended learning outcomes. Then they use certain coursework, certain different type of coursework, and then combine and give you figures and numbers. So that's how I heard how they do the measurement of achievement of those course level intended learning outcome. Hope it works. I know it's difficult. Okay. Yes, I got.
I'm Kim. So I have a question, because when we talk about learning, learning is always regarded as a process rather than just the outcome. So when we talk about the outcome assessment, I mean, a lot of assessment is just assessing the outcome. But when you talk about blended learning, no matter it's asynchronous or synchronous, they are also a little bit more about engagement. Engagement is a process. So do we need to assess, I mean, how whether they are engaged a lot? I mean, just like in our syllabus, we may put, say, 10% or 5% participation mark. So that is a kind of engagement. So when we talk about all this, so that means, should we try to rearrange those percentages? I mean, especially later on, you will talk more about AI tools. That means a lot of outcome can be produced by AI nowadays. So should we more concerned about the process instead of just the outcome? So that's my question. The second question is regarding to engagement, especially in teamwork, because a lot of our students are AD students, associate degree students. They are very, very grade conscious. So in my experience, when they've tried to form group and had some kind of internal discussion and then present the outcome or write a group paper, something like that. So that's one problem. Those less competent students are being left out. They're being isolated. So that is one problem. And when we talk about, say, giving other opinion or share the work, so that's a problem. They won't. because they're grade conscious. So that is the problem. I'm trying to think many ways to stop it, but once we talk about grading, then they won't do that. So are there any ways to help me in this way? Thank you.
Thanks for raising these great questions, particularly talking about process and outcome. In the past, when we talk about process, there was, it's like a swing the pendulums. There were times we just talk about outcome, what's the grade? And then there were times swing back to what about the process? And then it's the UGC, I'm not blaming them. They start talking back about outcome again. There was a period that people focus more about the process. That is, do we ask the student to produce a portfolio? When I said about portfolio is you just don't look at the end products, but in between, individuals have to produce a portfolio and documented steps and stages that they have contributed or they have done for individuals. So by the end, individuals have its own individual portfolio, even though individual might be engaged in some kind of group work and teamwork. This concept about portfolio back in over 10 years, if not 15 years ago, a hot topic, but it didn't took off well at that time because it costs time and energy, and who oversees the portfolio. There were times where this is a hot topic. It's not just a hot topic. This works. It works in some universities, not in Hong Kong. And that the whole idea is if you ask students to spend so much time create a portfolio from year one until they graduate, who is putting an eye on it? Who is giving them feedback on things that they have compiled? That's a gap there. And some institution will just pass several. Oh, the student association will look into it. Oh, that. So for academics, it's hard for them to look at single individual portfolio, except some discipline. When I said except, some discipline is a requirement, like in art and design, like in architectures. Those discipline is way of doing. They must have a portfolio. They must document how they have the ideas, how the ideas evolve, how they produce the end product. Okay, it can be a teamwork. I mean, a group project, even though they might have some individual sort of work, but they must produce a portfolio. So I can't say a portfolio is a solution because I know not many teachers prepare to spend time to look closely into students' portfolio work. Without teachers' feedback, students can have, why bother? Oh, because I'm going to show it to my future potential employer. Not true in Hong Kong either. So it's always like an eggs and chickens. I mean, there are things happen overseas or somewhere that works and helps to look at the processes. Yes?
AI tool.
To look at the portfolio. I'm looking forward to that. Okay, so address the question about the process and then whether AI may help later. And then when you talk about group work, problems of working in teams, it's an age-old problem. It started anything with working in groups in teams, particularly when we ask a team and looking at the end product and then you give a grade, right? So who would like to take the risk? Grade C is okay, unless there are people who would like to take whatever it comes. That's all you get. You will get the best students to do the writing. Okay, so that the team will get an A grade. And that's happened all the time. And I can also share with you, remember I talked about the project that I used, the wiki. That wiki collect students working in groups in projects. And for that wiki as a platform, not just document the final end products, And that's a tools or the platform that has been available for over decades. Again, what happened is that would document all students' actions, right from students gathering ideas, they put it onto their wiki project sites, and that how things are developed and evolved. And you can easily check what's if you really have to look into the processes of teamwork, you can easily quickly see, oh, how many contributions from what students from a wiki page. But I know nowadays not many people even heard of wiki, not Wikipedia, right? It's a wiki sort of platform, allows students working groups to have individual input and then finalize everything through that platform. But to me, that works for me when I was a teacher working in Hong Kong U, when students have to do their project through that platform. And I can easily spot some more active students and who's doing more and who's doing less. Back to some students who may not be accepted to work in teams. That's another sort of issues which teachers often have to encounter, how you can help the students to go back to work in groups. Teamwork always have a question is somebody may not be able to join a team, whether you give them options. I remember when I was studying in the UK, when we were asked to work in teamwork, we were open up. You form your team. You can choose work individually. That's an option. But of course, if you think about a project that will allow us work individually and as in team, the team, I will all pretty much sure they got more variety, more output because they got more people in mind and had to work to get our product. But if the person choose to work individually, some people work better individually, some. But then it's up to you whether you have this kind we call differentiated assessment. That is, with one kind of overarching project you want them to do, but you allow the flexibility in terms of what the focus can be, the formation of team, size of the team. And surely you won't say, oh, you can work in 10. No, I won't allow groups of 10 to work in a team project. You know, it doesn't work well. But if you say, I want them to work in 4 or 5, but if people want to choose to work individually or in pairs, they can choose it. Then it will allow them the choice, student-like choice. That is, they might have to do some self-assessment, whether they work maybe faster, more efficient, more effective individually. Some do, okay? Whereas with the other one, you allow them to work in groups. Then you can equally argue, well, we didn't really put them into real workplace. The real workplace had them to work in teams, whether they liked it or not, right? Because you cut some people who cannot work in teams. There's no way to win all situations. I think you have to sense it. As I said, every time when you try a different approach, you can sense this year I try the options which allowed them to have different size of teams and see how students respond to you. You can try it, okay? But I cannot offer you a best outcome, how to handle students. But I heard one story from my former colleagues. She said she will call in meetings with the teams in the early stage. She can sense if any teams have single individuals have problem. She detected early. And what she did, she talked to the students who don't really work well with the group and asked the students whether the students want to work independently or whether the person prepared to work as a team. So that some way helps the student to rethink whether they prepare to work in teams. I think there's a two-way process. The person who have difficulty joining a team and also the team itself. So, but early detection is needed to find particularly few students who have difficulties to join in groups or to work in groups. That's the sort of thought I can share with you. Right. I think we have the last 15 minutes, the most exciting time comes when we talk about AI a little bit more, because we know the technology has changed so fast in the past few years, not because of COVID, but whether COVID gives them more time to do more development. We know the hottest topics is about AI, and both in education field and also in business world, because AI permeate in every single industry. This is another sort of story back in 2019. This is Georgia Tech. These are the professor teaching computing science, and these are the TAs sitting with him. And there's a virtual TA right here. The virtual TA score the teaching award. That's nominated by the students, okay? The TA award. But how come a virtual TA got the award? The virtual TA replies the student 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So the students do that. If they ask a question 2 o'clock in the morning, we got an answer straight away. So virtual TA, it's kind of here now. But of course, different institutions may adopt it. Some institutions still has all traditional way of working. But technology does help. And nowadays, AI can help teachers like you. Instead of have a studio to do the recording of your teaching materials, there is software that you just type in your text or your scripts, and will generate with an avatar, male or female, long hair, short hair, for you. Okay? Don't ask me how much it might cost, but it's here. That is, systems is here to speed up all the production time. And in fact, we heard this March, I think. No, it's now in April. What is February or not? February, March time. The ChatGPT were given tests and it got pretty not bad result. It passed, even in medical exams. You ask ChatGPT, yeah, it can score. It's generated by GPT-3, not even GPT-4. Okay, so the AI, the world has kind of responding to all kinds of questions, and they can give you answers. Of course, we can see you can treat it as a threat. One day, this is the teacher in the classroom. One day, this is the teacher in front of the classroom with a robotic arm teaching you. Don't even need a human being. Can it happen? Well, it's that interesting enough. I found that there's an article talk about 60% of workers in the occupation did not exist in 1940. Okay, even in those days, there are new jobs, or the old jobs have to fade out or become redundant, but there are new jobs coming. So you might think that many jobs will be going. Does it mean a lot of people become redundant? That's one threat. The other is the threat of our students' work. Is it done by the student? I try out whether I can make use of the tools to help me. Definitely not. This PowerPoint I created myself, okay? But what it meant is if I try to join in the Google Bard, is that, sorry, it's not currently supported in your country, so I can't try it. And then there's another OpenAI, access denied. At the moment, when I'm in Hong Kong, part of China, I cannot have access to those sort of AI tools. And I cannot give you answers straight away how powerful it can be. But when I watch YouTubes about people using the tools, my jaw drops. There are tutors, which is a very powerful tutors that act as I thought, doing pretty good. Lately, just very recently, when I look at Khan Academy, Khan Academy has been opened up a lot of free courses for students doing physics, maths, chemistry, a variety of subjects through the course. And now they have a virtual tutor called Kamigo. Yeah, Kamigo. And when I look at it, normally I don't recommend this kind of tutor, just kind of. But when I really watch it demonstrating how it guides students, the students who ask, here's a question, a mathematical question. Give me an answer. So the Kamigo will say, oh, I can see you have a difficulty of challenges to find the answer. The virtual tutor is not prepared to give an answer. That's how it's being programmed. And that's why if you are interested, go and have a look at it. And I strongly, not because there's a very good tutor. It is an interest because I always thought students just want an answer. For AI, just when I go Google an answer, I got an answer. So would this tutor give an answer straight away? No, it didn't. It just guide the students through questions, and as the students respond, they got the students to have more sort of guided questions, which I quite like. If you have time, you can have a look. So for teachers, can we make use of the AI for this platform? Even give tools for teachers, not just for the students. It also give how to create some kind of lesson plan, how to do an exit tickets, that is end of session question. So it helps teachers to ease off some of their preparation time as well. So if you have time, have a look. But when I look at more things happening very, very recently, a term called Copilot. Copilot is a product from Microsoft 365. And at the moment, I am still barred. That is in the waiting list. I haven't tried myself. At first, okay, yet another tools like GPT-4. But this works with Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint, Microsoft Excel. Those are the common platform that we teachers or our students use it for teaching and learning. So it can have a very deep impact on what we want to do. One thing I'm kind of jaw dropped is it helps spontaneously, instantly, and that it will give you a template and ideas.
Introducing Microsoft 365 Copilot, your Copilot for work. Copilot combines the power of large language models with your data in the Microsoft Graph and the Microsoft 365 apps to turn your words into the most powerful productivity tool on the planet.
It's coming to life in the products millions of people use and rely on every day. Let's see how Copilot can use your customer notes in OneNote as well as another internal document. Copilot quickly creates a first draft. You can turn your Word document into a PowerPoint presentation that you can hone and polish. Let's jump into Copilot in Excel. You start by asking Copilot to analyze the data and give you 3 key trends. Within seconds, you've got what you need. Triage your inbox, highlighting the most important emails to prioritize. You can draft a reply using data from an Excel file, and Copilot will generate a reply for you.
The real magic of Copilot happens during a live meeting. You can ask Copilot to summarize what's happened so far. You can see who said what points were made. You can follow a meeting and catch up to see what you missed, even if you can't attend.
I want to show you an entirely new standalone experience. Business chat works across all your emails, files, meetings, chats, documents, calendar, and more to turn all your data into knowledge.
Now let's imagine you're working on your business strategy. You ask Copilot to pull up quarterly projections and identify related risks. Copilot gives you key data points and flags potential issues.
We're deeply committed to listening, learning, and adapting with speed to help create a brighter future of work for everyone with AI.
So, having seen this, I'm not so sure your immediate responses about how effective things can be with the two AI. But answering the question what Lillian mentioned, when we get students to work on portfolio, yes, they can get feedback because you can get students to compile and then just ask Copilot, can you give me a comment or a suggestion, the strength, the weaknesses, or points to remember? So it can. In other words, staff don't have time, don't have enough time to give immediately timely feedback. The chat can. Chat. I mean, even though the only thing is, how can students get access to those tools? Because it allows quite a chunky information to be put in to ask for comments. And even if they work in documents with the Word, if they prepare the portfolio in Word documents, they can just relate it to the Copilot and ask the Copilot to make a summary, make comment on it, do it instantly. So even when the Word document or the portfolio is long or with images, it doesn't matter to it. So it can be the solution for the future. And thanks for pointing it out, because not just how it might affect the students producing the work, but as teachers, I have just to, even though I must say I retired now, but I do reflect on how much I can change the way I do now, given that when I have an access to a powerful tool that helped me to save my time, that helped me to find sort of things that I might have overseas. So I'm using it as a tool to help me. But I strongly recommend you, if you have time, this summer, they will yet have more sort of development coming in the summer. But when you have your summer break, spend time over this tool. Sometimes you can call it toy, to see how it might help to improve your work output in terms of your work preparation, preparing your PowerPoint, if not how to set assignment, how to set quizzes, how to give feedback. All this can have a tool to speed up your work. And I would say, I strongly recommend it worth your time to do this investment. And I got another link that will give you more time to see the features over, particularly on Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. But I'm not showing you it now. But one thing there are people who think about, if we see it as a threat, let's turn it as an opportunity. An opportunity for us, what we can make use of, if we can use it as a tool in the classroom, in the teaching, what we can do with that. Whether we can set up some initial data from the chat and then ask students to make critique on the site, in the classroom, the solutions suggested by the AI. So we can make use of it. We're not being threatened because it has changed so fast, so much. But as we become more familiar in terms of what it can do, we are pushing up our own sort of critical thinking, our analysis, getting our students to not just blindly believe every single words, because there are still errors, there are still biases in terms of what is generated. So this is the time, I would say more exciting than my good old days in teaching, is that you got something right here as if this is an answer. Look more closely. There are errors or flaws. So that's exactly what we need to help our students, to sharpen their mind, to get them to think more closely what they have read and what the flaw lines, if not the gaps of information is there. Okay, so this is actually a guidebook written related to the teacher, for the teachers, and you can download it as a PDA. Coming to the end of this workshop, I feel, to me, it's a very beneficial to myself, even though I'm kind of look back what I have walked through in my 20 years of teaching, giving you some thought about what we can do. Some of them can be very exciting. Some of them can be a bit daunting. Depends on how much you want to trial with technology. But as I feel like knowing you up to this sort of latest trend, particularly it's not just because it's in the news about something happened here and then about the ChatGPT. It happened to you in your institution in Hong Kong. While some of the institution have a policy to say, no, don't do it. But some institutions have making use of it. So we got to be smart. How can we make use of it rather than stopping anyone to use the Chat GPT or GPT-4? So I love to call it a close, even though I like to see you in person. But if I couldn't, I would invite you to have more conversation over this. And I'm sure Lillian will have more ideas about what to do with the AI. So my concluding thought is, yes, technology is moving fast. And I have been growing up and my career goes with the changes in technology. When you heard me mention about blog, Wikipedia, all these are unfolding and, over those years. But sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I always come to the front runner. I have to try it myself first. Because without me trying, I cannot share experience with people. I cannot just say, hey, look at this and look at that. I have no personal experience. And the other thing is I always invite you to try, and that is have a mind over doing some kind of educational research. That is seeing how students respond to you in terms of how you change your teaching, the way how you teach or things that you try. Always get some feedback from students, how they think about it. Does it work for them? Does it help them? Then you can help to revise it and change it the next time. So I encourage you to try to do some educational research if you're interested in, and surely the AI is unfolding excitement for you. I thank you for all your time, your attention, and in fact, I love seeing you in person one day. But in the meantime, I thank all of you. Thank you very much. Is there any questions or anything in? No. Yeah. Lilian want to.
Listening to the concluding remarks of Paula, and she shows how ChatGPT can help us to be a better teacher. Now, my thinking is if we do not allow students to explore ChatGPT, they can explore ChatGPT by themselves outside the classroom. And they soon learn that you, teacher, are good for nothing because ChatGPT, I learn much more from ChatGPT than you. Then why should I come to the class? This is something that we have really to think about. If we don't use it, and we can tell the students, I'm using ChatGPT to help you to also enhance your critical thinking, as when you say analytical skills. You give better work. And then when you give better work to ChatGPT, they will continue to enhance your skills, enhance your knowledge. So to me, it is important that we must first learn how to use ChatGPT for our own use and how to teach students to use ChatGPT for their own use. The business world is using it. If we don't, we are lagging behind, and our students will be marginalized. That's something that I truly believe. Thank you. Thank you, Nora, for Paula, giving us this concluding which is to me very important. Thank you.
Thanks, Lillian. I thank all of you. If there's no more questions, I think we'll close this workshop, and all the best to you. Thank you.